morning, students. I hope I'm audible. Online students, Rutuja, Vaishnavi. All right, thank you. Now, we were talking about the Vijayanagara Empire. We had looked at the political history. We had taken a brief background of the emergence of the Vijayanagar power in the Deccan region, and we had talked about the Vijayanagar administration at various levels, right? Central administration, provincial administration, the feudal system, Nayankar system, the village local self governance known as the Ayagar system. ये सब हमने cover कर लिया था. Now we need to take care of a couple of debates. The first one regarding the, let's say, was the Vijayanagar Empire the result of Hindu resistance and a symbol of Hindu रिवाइवलिज्म. ठीक है, तो एक ये डिस्कस करना है हमको. द अदर डिबेट वी नीड टू डिस्कस इज रिगार्डिंग द नेचर ऑफ द विजयनगर स्टेट. ठीक है, तो वन बाय वन बोथ ऑफ दीज वी नीड टू एड्रेस. सबसे पहले ये वाला, was the Vijayanagara Empire the result of Hindu resistance and a symbol of Hindu revivalism? तो बताइए, इस टॉपिक को हमने ब्रीफली ऑलरेडी टच किया हुआ है. Would it be correct to call the Vijayanagara Empire the result of Hindu resistance and a symbol of Hindu revivalism? Was it only a Hindu state or was it something more also? वो केवल हिंदुइज्म को प्रोटेक्ट करने की बुनियाद पे ही बना था या फिर अदर फैक्टर्स भी रिस्पॉन्सिबल थे? अदर फैक्टर्स वर आल्सो रिस्पॉन्सिबल. Did it perpetually promote only Hindu culture and push forward only Hindu interests, neglecting and discriminating against the others, or were secular considerations also more important? Did the Vijayanagar rulers espouse only Hindu culture or did they promote cultural diversity? क्या था cultural diversity? Did they have a tolerant outlook or an intolerant outlook when it came to non-Hindus and other outsiders? Tolerant tha. Were secular considerations more important or religious considerations more important when making state policies, in especially foreign policy? Secular considerations were more important. तो हम क्या accurately ये claim कर सकते हैं that the Vijayanagar Empire was the result of Hindu resistance and a symbol of Hindu revivalism, or is this a misconception that prevails in history? It is more of a misconception. ठीक है, secular considerations were always more important. तो सतह के ऊपर से देखने पे, from the surface, it may seem that this analysis is accurate, but when you go deeper and study the actual characteristics of the Vijayanagar Empire, the policies of its rulers, both domestic and foreign, how they treated non-Muslims, it is going to become clear that this is more of a misconception. ठीक है, write down. तो ये heading दे दो. You can write this down in the form of a question and answer. Question: Was the Vijayanagara Empire the result of Hindu resistance and a symbol of Hindu revivalism? Question mark. आंसर लिखो. The Vijayanagara Empire was created by the brothers Harihar and Bukka through a successful rebellion against Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Full stop. The circumstances of its formation and some of its early policies create an impression that Vijayanagar was a Hindu power, within quotes, was a Hindu power. In perpetual opposition to Muslim rivals. Full stop. In fact, the colonial school of historians portrayed the Vijayanagar state as a result of Hindu resistance and a symbol of Hindu revivalism. Full stop. They credit the Vijayanagar rulers for preserving the ancient Hindu culture of South India. ठीक है, ये हो गया एक इंट्रोडक्शन. पिक्चर क्लियर है अभी तक? क्या अभी तक सुपरफिशियली देखने में क्या लग रहा है? एंड द रीजन इज बिकॉज ऑफ द हिस्टोरियोग्राफी ऑफ कॉलोनियल हिस्टोरियंस ने इंडिया का हिस्ट्री किस तरह का लिखा? an unbiased secular history or a distinctively and deliberately communal picture was drawn by them. कॉम्युनलाइज करने की कोशिश करी उन्होंने इंडियन हिस्ट्री को. हमेशा क्या दिखाने की कोशिश करी? that Hindus and Muslims were always in constant competition against each other. They were never willing to accept that there was a great degree of complexity in the Hindu-Muslim relationship, especially when it came to political relations. It was not simply a black and white picture. There was also a lot of color. Okay? But that was deliberately hidden from us because they wanted to fulfill their own agenda. उनका अपना रीजन था ना इंडिया की हिस्ट्री लिखने का. दैट इज व्हाट दे वर ट्राइंग टू डू. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट पोर्शन लिखो, नेक्स्ट पैराग्राफ. Upon closer observation, however, comma, a more nuanced picture emerges. A more nuanced picture, N-U-A-N-C-E-D. N-U-A-N-C-E-D, nuanced picture. Nuanced मतलब ये थोड़ा और subtle picture जिसमें थोड़ी और complexity हो. ठीक है, nuanced picture emerges. Full stop. Point form में लिखो. It is true that Harihar and Bukka had joined the rebellion against Muhammad bin Tughlaq launched by Musunuri Kapaya Nayaka, who had given the slogan of Hindu revivalism. Comma. This should be seen as more of what kind of move? A move dictated primarily by political concerns or religious concerns. रिलीजन को वो एक्चुअली प्रमोट करना चाह रहे थे, प्रोटेक्ट करना चाह रहे थे, और रिलीजन का हेल्प लेने चाह रहे थे अपने पॉलिटिकल ऑब्जेक्टिव्स को फुलफिल करने के लिए. रिलीजन की हेल्प लेनी चाह रहे थे. So how would you characterize this? As a political move or as a religious cultural move? As a political move. Write down. More of a political move. Full stop. The rebels successfully utilized the powerful emotional appeal of religion, to fulfill their aspirations of creating an independent regional kingdom. ठीक है, is this clear? Next main point लिखो. Sorry, next point. Further, it should also be remembered that it was a common practice for medieval rulers. It was a common practice for medieval rulers to frame themselves and their projects within the framework of religion. Within the framework of religion. Why do you think this was? कि हर कोई रिलीजन के नाम पे ही पॉलिटिक्स करने की कोशिश करता था, उससे डिविएट नहीं करने की कोशिश करता था. Why did everyone, all the important rulers, try to portray themselves as the champions of religion and as the champions of dharma or as the champions of Islam? ऐसे करने की कोशिश क्यों करते थे वो लोग? Because it was politically exigent, उससे फायदा मिल रहा था. People are not going to question their motives. Naturally, they are going to attract a great degree of support. We are talking about a time in which the thinking was pre-rational, not necessarily completely rational. People were motivated by things such as religion, right? तो religion को काफी ज्यादा तवज्जो देते थे उस समय के लोग. And that is what these people were using. ठीक है? Write down. This, हाँ same में, this is due to, or this was a function of, ये काट दो, this was a function of, this was a function of the pre-rational medieval mindset, the pre-rational medieval mindset in which religion played a decisive role in shaping public opinion, shaping public opinion. ठीक है? So were the rulers of Vijayanagar doing something that was completely exceptional or something that was routine for their time? Something that was routine for their time, nothing extraordinary. ठीक है? Write down. In this light, comma, it becomes clear that the actions of the Vijayanagar rulers were ordinary and expected in their times, ठीक है? नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. While it may not be denied, that the rulers of Vijayanagar were great patrons of Hindu culture. इसके साथ साथ हमको और क्या समझना चाहिए? Once again, they were carrying forward the tradition of previous rulers. बाकी सब ने भी तो टेम्पल्स बनवाए, बाकी सब ने भी पेंटिंग्स बनवाई, रिलीजियस म्यूजिक को, लिटरेचर को, स्कॉलरशिप को प्रमोट किया, पेट्रनाइज किया. So were they doing anything that was not expected of a ruler of their generation, or were they doing exactly what was expected of them? ठीक है? And Can the same also be said for the Islamic rulers who were their contemporaries towards their north, towards their south? वो भी तो इस्लामिक कल्चर को प्रमोट कर रहे थे. So why only single out Vijayanagar rulers और उनको बोल दो that they were symbols of Hindu revivalism, right? That is unfair. Write down. At the same time, comma, it should also be remembered. It should also be remembered that rulers in medieval India were expected to promote cultural activities and since most culture was derived and dependent on religion most culture was derived from and dependent on religion, the political class invariably endorsed a strong religiously tinged tinged cultural identity. Full stop. The same can be said for contemporary Islamic rulers who unanimously promoted Islamic culture. ठीक है? Is this clear? Now, although the Vijayanagar rulers undoubtedly promoted Hindu culture and tried to project a strong Hindu cultural identity, will it be correct to say that they suppressed the expression of other cultures? बाकियों पे कोई रोक लगाया, डिस्क्रिमिनेट किया उनके अगेंस्ट, उनको परसिक्यूट किया या फिर टॉलरेंट एटीट्यूड था? अगर एक्चुअल में हिंदू रिवाइवलिज्म होता या फिर इट वाज एन रिजल्ट ऑफ हिंदू रेजिस्टेंस अगेंस्ट इस्लामिक अग्रेशन, तो वुड द विजयनगर रूलर्स हैव टॉलरेटेड एनी इस्लामिक पीपल और द एक्सप्रेशन ऑफ देयर फेथ और द एक्सप्रेशन ऑफ देयर कल्चर, या फिर नहीं टॉलरेट करते अगर रियलिटी में ऐसा होता तो. बट दैट इज नॉट द केस एट ऑल. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो, नंबर 4. फर्दर, it should also be noted that the Vijayanagar rulers had a remarkably tolerant attitude towards other cultures and religions. Full stop. Contemporary indigenous and foreign records note almost unanimously that Muslims and foreigners enjoyed complete religious freedoms. Complete religious freedoms. Full stop. They were not subjected to any disabilities. They were not subjected to any disabilities. And could express their culture freely. And could express their culture freely. Full stop. The construction of mosques was allowed and in fact encouraged. And in fact encouraged. Especially in which region? साउथ में कहाँ पर? जहाँ पे मुस्लिम्स का concentration ज़्यादा होगा. In which region was that? Malabar region, Malabar coast पर. Especially in the Malabar region. Especially in the Malabar region. Full stop. Next sub point. इसी में एक सब पॉइंट लिखो. Further the state did not discriminate in matters of employment on the basis of religion. On the basis of religion. Full stop. Both Farishta and Abdur Razzaq noted the presence of several thousand Muslim soldiers in the Vijayanagar army. In the Vijayanagar army. Full stop. Similarly, next point. Similarly, the bulk of Vijayanagar's foreign trade was controlled initially by the Arab and later by the Portuguese traders. Later by the Portuguese traders. ठीक है? इतना क्लियर है ना? So once again, attitudes were tolerant. Now, one allegation that has been made against the Vijayanagar rulers is that they modeled their policies in the light of the Dharma Shastra principles. ठीक है? तो धर्म शास्त्रास में there is an entire theory of state also. The king is supposed to live by certain commandments, observe a few values and try to uphold the idea of dharma, right? तो ये allegation लगाया गया है and ये बोला गया है that this is what qualifies Vijayanagar Empire as a conservative Hindu power. ठीक है, let us investigate how far that is true. Write down. Next main point लिखो. Another allegation against the Vijayanagar rulers is that they tried to uphold the Dharma Shastra principles, when formulating policies and making decisions. अब ये बताओ that were they doing anything out of the ordinary? या फिर वही कर रहे थे जो इसके पहले सैकड़ों साल तक बाकी रूलर्स ने भी किया था? एंड ऑन द अदर साइड ऑफ द इक्वेशन, were they not also doing the same thing that Muslim rulers were doing? They were trying to uphold the Sharia, right? So how are they different from their previous rulers and their contemporaries? कोई essential फर्क है? नहीं है. तो एक तो ये आप आर्गुमेंट कर सकते हो in order to weaken this position. So write down sub point. Firstly, comma, it should be remembered that such behavior was virtually expected of the rulers, Full stop. The Vijayanagar rulers had inherited the tradition of upholding dharma, from the previous generations of rulers, both in South and North India. Full stop. In this light, their actions do not seem exceptional. Full stop. At the same time, comma, the contemporary Muslim rulers were also adopting similar policies within the framework of Islam and the Sharia. ठीक है? So this is one counter argument against this position. ये धर्मशास्त्र प्रिंसिपल्स को अपहोल्ड कर रहे थे, दैट इज व्हाई दे वर अ सिंबल ऑफ हिंदू रिवाइवलिज्म. सेकंड आर्गुमेंट क्या कर सकते हो आप, सेकंड काउंटर आर्गुमेंट, दैट दिस पोजीशन इज बेस्ड ऑन एन अजम्पशन. क्या अजम्पशन? ये जो आइडिया ऑफ धर्म है दैट वाज ऑलवेज स्ट्रिक्टली इम्प्लीमेंटेड विदाउट फेल, ठीक है, एंड एवरी रूलर ट्राइड टू इम्प्लीमेंट इट इन द सेम मैनर. देयर वाज नो चेंज एवर. डज दिस फिट विद द नैरेटिव, विद द पैटर्न ऑफ विजयनगर्स हिस्ट्री? क्या ये एक्यूरेट लगता है कि सबने ही अप्लाई करने की कोशिश करी विदाउट एनी मॉडिफिकेशन, विदाउट टेकिंग एनीथिंग एल्स इनटू कंसिडरेशन, या फिर थोड़ा वेरिएशन होगा, कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी होगा? क्या आइडिया है? The ideas of the dharma shastras are normative. They represent an ideal situation. वो नाम में ही अगर आइडियल आ रहा है तो it could not be the exact reality. Reality is always going to be far more complex. Yes, the rulers tried to uphold dharma shastras and the idea of dharma, but only as far as it was in their own interest. या तो उससे कोई कमर्शियल फायदा हो रहा है, या फिर कोई स्ट्रेटेजिक फायदा हो रहा है, या पॉलिटिकल फायदा हो रहा है, या फिर इकोनॉमिक फायदा हो रहा है, सोशल कोई ऑब्जेक्टिव्स फुलफिल करने में मदद हो रही है. अगर ये सब हो रहा है तभी तक अप्लाई करेंगे उसको. हाउएवर अदर कंसिडरेशन, secular considerations were also equally important for them. And here the Vijayanagar rulers went one step ahead. उस समय the idea of social reform, do you think it was widespread? Do you think that the political class saw it as its responsibility to reform the society? या फिर सोसाइटी में जो हो रहा है, जो भी इंस्टीट्यूशंस हैं, केवल उनको अपहोल्ड करने की कोशिश करते थे, उनको कभी चैलेंज नहीं करने की कोशिश करते थे? विच ऑफ द टू डू यू थिंक, पहला या दूसरा? पहला. ज्यादातर रूलर्स कोई भी छेड़खानी करने की कोशिश नहीं करते थे. The political, the monarchs by definition conservative institutions होते हैं, ठीक है, and they take the support of all similar conservative institutions. And conservative institutions में कभी कभी कुछ weaknesses, कुछ evils seep in हो जाते हैं, which require a tremendous amount of energy, the spending of a great degree of political capital in order to reform them, in order to remove those evils, those malpractices. तो उनको रिमूव करने में रूलर का एक्चुअली कोई फायदा नहीं होता है, उसका नुकसान ही होता है. एंड दस मोस्ट रूलर्स ऑफ मेडिवल इंडिया डिड नॉट हैव दिस काइंड ऑफ सोशली रिफॉर्मेटिव एजेंडा. कंपेयर देम टू द रूलर्स ऑफ विजयनगर. विजयनगर सोसाइटी वाज आल्सो अ कंटिन्यूएशन ऑफ द प्रीवियस साउथ इंडियन सोसाइटी, जहां पे ब्राह्मणिकल ऑर्थोडॉक्सी का बड़ा बोलबाला होने लग गया था, राइट? तो इट ब्राह्मणिकल ऑर्थोडॉक्सी, जो ब्राह्मणिकल फिलॉसफी है, that was in a dominant position. और उसमें बताओ विमेन का पोजीशन क्या होता है? अगर ऑर्थोडॉक्स ब्राह्मणिकल फिलॉसफी के बेसिस पर सोसाइटी बनाई गई है, तो डू विमेन एंजॉय अ वेरी हाई पोजीशन और डू दे एंजॉय अ कंप्लीटली लो पोजीशन? लो पोजीशन, राइट? They are subjected to a number of disabilities and restrictions. Especially poor is the condition of widows. Are they allowed to remarry or not? They are not allowed to remarry. But विजयनगर रूलर्स ने क्या किया? बहुत बड़ा रिस्क लेकर के विडो रीमैरिज को एक तो लीगली सैंक्शन किया, एंड दे इवन ट्राइड टू एनकरेज इट. कैसे? ऑल मैरिजेस, उसके ऊपर एक टैक्स लगता था, रिमेंबर ना? बट विडो रीमैरिजेस के ऊपर जो टैक्स है दैट वाज, उसको माफ कर दिया गया था. दैट वाज विडो रीमैरिजेस वर exempt from taxation, from the regular taxation. So although society frowned upon the remarriage of widows, the kings of Vijayanagar took it upon themselves to encourage the remarriage of widows, right? Now had it been a truly a symbol of Hindu revivalism, do you think this kind of a decision could ever have been taken? नहीं. ठीक, समझ में आया है? That is the second counter argument to this position. Write down next sub point. Secondly, comma, The Vijayanagar rulers, demonstrated a great degree of initiative and flexibility when applying the principles of the Dharma Shastras. Principles of the Dharma Shastras. Their policies were the result of a proper weightage to both the Dharma Shastra principles and material considerations Full stop. In other words, Dharma was upheld only to that degree or only to that extent would be a better word, only to that extent that it did not interfere with the secular considerations of the rulers ठीक है. नेक्स्ट सब पॉइंट लिखो. Thirdly, comma, the Vijayanagar rulers often acted in a direct contravention of Dharma principles. Full stop. While the Dharma Shastras prohibited widow remarriages, comma, the rulers encouraged it. Full stop. The rulers encouraged it. Full stop. ठीक है. कितने आर्ग्यूमेंट्स कर चुके हैं हम? 4 मेन पॉइंट्स लिख चुके हैं. 5, हाँ नहीं, 5 पॉइंट्स हो गए ना. तो नेक्स्ट लिखो. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट नंबर 6. राइट डाउन. One of the strongest arguments in favor of the Hindu state or Hindu revivalist state framework, Hindu revivalist state framework was the perpetual conflict between Vijayanagar and which other power? And Bahmani. Between Vijayanagar and Bahmani. Full stop. Often this conflict resulted in large scale communal violence, and cultural conflict ठीक है. So often these conflicts ended with a bloody communal pogrom. तो अगर विजयनगर फोर्सेस सक्सीड करी हैं बहमनी की आर्मीज को हराने में, they would always follow up by destroying a few mosques, killing a number of Muslim subjects in the Bahmani kingdom, right? And Bahmanis bhi, they would also return the favor. Whenever they were on the front foot, they are also going to do the same thing, destroy some temples, king some Hindu soldiers, king some Hindu leaders, and even ordinary Hindu people, try to religiously convert them, forcible conversions वगैरह ये सब करने की कोशिश करते थे, ठीक है. And on the basis of this communal angle to the conflict, the colonial historians have argued that as the Bahmani kingdom was a Muslim power, so the Vijayanagar Empire was a Hindu power, and they were always in constant conflict against each other. Now we need to see ये कितना सही है कितना गलत है. तो बताओ काउंटर आर्ग्यूमेंट्स क्या हो सकते हैं इसके अगेंस्ट. Had the Vijayanagar Empire been a Hindu power first and a secular power second, and had the Bahmani kingdom been a Muslim power first and a secular power second, could they ever have allied against each other, or could they ever have allied with each other? इनके बीच में कभी अलायंस पॉसिबल होता नहीं, लेकिन अलायंस भी हुआ है, राइट. Would it have been possible for two Hindu powers to for one Muslim and one Hindu power to form a common alliance against another Hindu power? ऐसा होता नहीं होता. Would the Bahmani kingdom have tried to suppress or absorb any other Muslim sultanate, Muslim kingdom, उसके अगेंस्ट कोई वॉर करते नहीं करते. Similarly, would the Vijayanagar rulers have ever attacked any other Hindu kingdom? वो भी नहीं करते, right? लेकिन ये सब देखने के लिए मिलता है, right? That is one thing. That when applying राजमंडला principles, जो foreign policy के principles होते हैं, only and only secular considerations were put forward. Religion did not factor at all. ठीक है? For example, there was a long-term alliance between Warangal and Bahmanis against the Vijayanagar rulers. Finally, that was dissolved, and Vijayanagar was able to defeat Firuz Shah Bahmani because of that. ये हम एक एपिसोड देख चुके हैं, right? Secondly, there was a long-term occupation of the Krishna Godavari Delta by the Gajpati rulers of Odisha. Gajpati rulers of Odisha, Hindu power or Muslim power? Hindu power. They had attacked and occupied a region of Vijayanagar territory. तो विजयनगर उनको वहां से एविक्ट करने के लिए किसकी मदद लेगा? Bahmanis की. Could this kind of equation have actually been possible if it was in reality a Hindu revivalist state? ये एक्टिविटी पॉसिबल ही नहीं हो, ठीक है. अच्छा, दूसरी चीज We know that the Vijayanagar rulers did not discriminate on the basis of religion. उनकी आर्मी में there were several thousands of Muslim soldiers, Muslim archers, commanders, officers who were all paid handsomely, right? Even lands were given to them in order to ensure their loyalty. Similarly, बहमनी किंगडम में भी बहुत सारे हिंदू सोल्जर्स थे. महमूद गवान का नाम सुना है? He was one time the prime minister of the Bahmani Sultanate. He adopted the policy of inviting Maratha soldiers. He rewarded their sardars, their chiefs, by giving them a large jagirs of land in order to ensure their loyalty towards the Bahmanis. And Marathas employ किए गए किसके against लड़ने में? Against both Khandesh, which was a Muslim power to their north, as well as Vijayanagar, which was a Hindu power to their south. So once again, दोनों में क्या देखने के लिए मिल रहा है? Is religion the dominant force? नहीं, secular considerations, जो material objectives हैं, that is the real reason. एक argument और किया जाता है that these two powers were fighting against each other simply to impose their own cultural identity upon the other. क्या यही reason था? Spread of Islam or spread of Hinduism? Was this the real reason behind their conflict? नहीं. What was the real reason? Both these powers were interested in some strategically and economically important areas, such as the region of Goa, the region of Raichur Doab, the region of Krishna Godavari Delta. वहां पे क्यों important था इनको ऑक्यूपाई करना? ट्रेड को कंट्रोल करने के लिए वेस्टर्न कोस्ट बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट था. रायचूर दोआब और कृष्णा गोदावरी डेल्टा, they are large and fertile tracts of land with high populations, so they are extremely productive with a big taxpayer base. So whichever power controlled them would be better off, would be more powerful, it would be able to further maximize its resources. That is why it was important. ठीक है? तो ये idea that it was a Hindu revivalist state, and it being a Hindu revivalist state brought it into conflict with the Bahmani Sultanate. Is this valid? No, it is not valid. Write down the point. Upon closer observation, a completely different picture emerges. Stop. While applying the Rajmandala principles, within brackets you can write foreign policy. Rajmandala principles. Foreign policy, close brackets. Secular considerations alone prevailed. Under this, further subpoints A, B, C, D करके लिख सकते हो. A, the earliest enemies of the Vijayanagar rulers कौन थे? The Hoysalas, right? And were they also a Hindu power or not? They were a Hindu power. In fact, they were one of the greatest patrons of Hindu culture ever in South India. The earliest enemies of the Vijayanagar rulers were the Hoysalas, who were great patrons of Hindu culture. B, when the Gajpatis of Odisha occupied parts of the Vijayanagara Empire, occupied parts of the Vijayanagara Empire. They were, they were evicted. They were evicted with the help of the Bahmanis. With the help of the Bahmanis. With the help, evicted with the help of the Bahmanis. They were evicted with the help of the Bahmanis. ठीक है, सी लिखो. वारंगल, वारंगल, a prominent regional Hindu power, was in a long-term alliance. Was in a long-term alliance with the Bahmanis against Vijayanagar. Against Vijayanagar. ठीक है, कंक्लूजन में क्या लिख सकते हैं हम? We will have to give our final judgment na, that whether it was the result of Hindu resistance and a symbol of Hindu revivalism or not. तो क्या बोलेंगे? Yes or no? It was not. Write down. On the basis of these arguments, comma, it becomes clear that the Vijayanagara Empire was neither the result of Hindu resistance nor a symbol of Hindu revivalism. Nor a symbol of Hindu revivalism. So if it was not these things, what was it, or what could we describe it as within this context, in this context? देखो, दो चीजों के बारे में हमको बात करनी है. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, इट्स फॉर्मेशन, was it the result of Hindu resistance or not, and second, was it a symbol of Hindu revivalism or not. इसको कैसे एड्रेस कर सकते हैं हम? If it was not a result of Hindu resistance, what was the major force behind the creation of the Vijayanagara Empire? क्या था? Secular geopolitical regional considerations, right? And the attempt of the regional ruling class to free themselves from the intrusion of Delhi, the exploitative intrusion of Delhi. Obviously, there is going to be resentment, and as soon as the imperial power starts to show the first signs of weakness, the the powerful local elements, they are going to get activated, right? And that is what was the result. Write down. Rather, it was a distinct, sorry, it was a geopolitical entity. It was a geopolitical entity with a regional power base that was created by ending the exploitative intrusion of that was created by ending the exploitative intrusion of a North Indian imperial power. A North Indian imperial power. क्या है ये? It is a regional geopolitical entity in competition against Delhi's imperialism, North India's imperialistic power. ठीक है, full stop. If it is not a symbol of Hindu revivalism, then what was it? It was a medieval state with a strong regional identity, with a complex and diverse mosaic like pattern, right? ऐसा नहीं है कि कलर केवल और केवल सैफरन था. इट वाज मल्टी कलर्ड, मल्टी फैसेटेड. ठीक है, राइट डाउन. फर्दर comma, culturally speaking, Vijayanagar was vibrant, diverse and lively. Lively, like all powers of that time. Like all powers of that time. ठीक है. So the same pattern was observable across India. कई जगहों पर इस्लामिक रूलर्स का रूल था, कुछ जगहों पर हिंदू रूलर्स का रूल था, राइट. बट इन एवरी केस was the non-dominant culture completely suppressed, या फिर it was also allowed to flourish? क्या नॉर्थ इंडिया में at this point of time temples were all broken, Hindus were all converted? ऐसा हुआ? नहीं हुआ. सिमिलरली विजयनगर एम्पायर में भी इसका उल्टा नहीं हुआ. हाँ, ये चीज हम जरूर एक्सेप्ट कर सकते हैं दैट द कल्चर ऑफ विजयनगर वाज डिस्टिंक्ट फ्रॉम अदर कल्चर्स. तो हर जगह पे रीजनलाइजेशन ऑफ कल्चर हो रहा था. कोई एक एक्स्ट्राऑर्डिनरी डोमिनेंट कल्चरल आइडेंटिटी कभी भी इम्पोज नहीं हो पाई इंडिया में, आज तक नहीं हो पाई है, राइट. एंड दस द कल्चर, although it was not homogeneous, it was quite distinct, ठीक है, from as compared to other regions. Write down. At the same time, the Vijayanagar Empire also had a distinct regional flavor to its culture. A distinct regional flavor to its culture. Go back to that question. Was the Vijayanagar Empire the result of Hindu resistance and a symbol of Hindu revivalism? Within 200 words, will you be able to condense these arguments and write it appropriately? हो जाएगा. हमने 5-6 arguments, मतलब points इस debate के we have enlightened, thrown light on them. उसी को आपको compress करना है with a proper introduction and conclusion. Word limit है 200 words, marks 15. सेकेंड डिबेट क्या है? नेचर ऑफ द विजयनगर स्टेट. नेचर ऑफ द विजयनगर स्टेट. नाउ लेट अस लुक एट दिस. First of all, there is a great variety of historical opinion as to the nature of the Vijayanagars state, resulting in a vibrant debate which is almost 100 years old at this point of time. 100 साल से इस मुद्दे के ऊपर डिबेट चला जा रहा है, राइट। सबसे पहले प्रोमिनेंट हिस्टोरियन है के ए नीलकंठ शास्त्री। What did he say about the विजयनगर एम्पायर? स्टेट किस तरह का था? A centralized one, decentralized one, feudal state, early state, क्या बोला है इन्होंने? He has also expressed similar views with regards to the Chola administration. जिन्होंने एंशियंट इंडिया अर्ली मेडिवल पोर्शन कवर किया था, चोला कवर किया था, तो वहां पे के नीलकंठ शास्त्री ने क्या बोला था? That it was highly centralized. यहाँ पे भी सेम चीज बोली है, that the state was highly centralized. The Vijayanagar emperor reigned as god on earth. His power was absolute and it was uniformly projected throughout the territory of the Vijayanagar Empire through an elaborate bureaucracy, a large army. The state was sustained with a rich taxation base which was supplemented, in which the mainstay was obviously land revenue, but it was also supplemented with commercial tolls and taxes. Okay? The first challenge to the idea of centralized state was posted by Bertenstein. He is also a participant of the debate on the nature of Chola state. Chola state के context में what had he said? That it was a segmentary state. It was not a completely centralized state. यहाँ पे भी इन्होंने यही बोला है. Within which, in this framework, क्या होता है? Power of the king is actually imagined as two different kinds of power. एक तो होता है real authority, real sovereignty, and the other is ritual sovereignty or religious sovereignty. According to Bertenstein, the king was able to project his real authority by means of his bureaucracy, his army, over a small portion of his entire territory. जो core region है वहां पे तो he was the real authority. Actually things were under his control. जो करना चाहता वो कर सकता था, अपनी मनमानी चला सकता था. But outside that core zone, his authority was more symbolic, based on rituals rather than real power. Why? Because in the peripheral regions there were a large number of powerful military rulers, military leaders, local chiefs, tribal chiefs, जिनके साथ कई सारे समझौते करने पड़ते थे, right? So over there his authority was symbolic, his authority was ritualistic. They did not owe their complete loyalty to the king, and rather they used to pay tribute to the king, right? तो king उनके इलाके में अपनी मनमानी नहीं चला सकता था. That is what Bertenstein has said. लेकिन बर्टनस्टाइन के व्यूज को बहुत मेजर चैलेंज मिला बाद में. एक तो ये कि द आर्कियोलॉजिकल एंड लिटरेरी डेटा ऑफ विजयनगर एम्पायर एंड चोला पीरियड आल्सो डज नॉट सपोर्ट दिस हाइपोथेसिस. सेकेंडली, ये जो सेगमेंटरी स्टेट मॉडल है that was never created in the Indian context. It had been imagined by another author, another historian, Aidan Southall, in the context of the Alur tribal society of Africa. So tribal societies by nature are far less complex. Tribal states में जो organizing power होता है, cohesion होता है, वो भी और काफी कम होता है organized society के मुकाबले. तो वहां पे तो ये मॉडल फिट होता था, but it would not be historically correct to impose this model on India. And once Bertenstein's model was challenged, then space for future theories, for further arguments emerged. Within this context, P.V. Mahalingam suggested that the Vijayanagara Empire was a feudal state like the European feudal states of the medieval age. So, European style feudal state. Now, a distinct characteristic of the European style feudal medieval states was that the entire society and economy were part of this feudal structure. At the top was the king, who at least nominally was the ruler of the entire realm, but real power was delegated, it was decentralized. The position of the king depended upon the support of feudal lords who owned or who had hereditary rights over large tracts of land, giving them the wherewithal to maintain a large army, maintain their own bureaucracy and administration, collect their own taxes and wage their own wars, right? And under European style feudalism, sub infeudation का principle भी apply होता था. So like the kings gave hereditary titles to the feudal lords, the top rank feudal lords, they also gave hereditary titles to their subordinates and so on and so forth. तो एक complete chain बन गया था which linked the king at the top to the peasant at the very bottom. ठीक है. And टीवी महालिंगम ने क्या बोला कि यहाँ पे भी यही यूरोपियन स्टाइल ऑफ फ्यूडल स्टेट अप्लाई होता था. However, प्रॉब्लम क्या था इस मॉडल के साथ and why it could not be applied to India? You remember feudalism debate हमने कवर किया था एंशिएंट में. वहां पे हरमन कुलके ने क्या बोला था? इंडिया में जो क्लाइमेटिक कंडीशंस हैं, नेचर ऑफ द लेबर मार्केट है, नेचर ऑफ द पेजेंट्री है, द पोजीशन ऑफ द पेजेंट्री, दैट वाज कंप्लीटली डिफरेंट, राइट? इंडिया का लैंड, स्पेशली इस रीजन का लैंड, विजयनगर रीजन का लैंड, दैट वाज एक्सट्रीमली प्रोडक्टिव, ट्रॉपिकल क्लाइमेट, सब ट्रॉपिकल क्लाइमेट है, प्रोडक्टिविटी इज एक्सट्रीमली हाई. Therefore, the powerful people, what are they going to try and do? Are they going to try and create a monopoly on the availability of labor, or are they going to try and corner the largest portion of the surplus? Largest portion of the surplus, क्योंकि labor के ऊपर dependent नहीं है surplus का creation, right? Therefore, the peasants were relatively freer. उनके ऊपर वो serfdom वाला system नहीं impose किया गया था. India historically had a free peasant economy, right? So that is why this European state feudalism could not be applicable in India. Secondly, yes, it is true that Vijayanagar rulers in the later period began giving hereditary grants to top military officials known as the Amarnayakas. But यहाँ पे यूरोपियन स्टाइल फ्यूडलिज्म में क्या होता था? that यहाँ पे मान लो सबसे ऊपर किंग है एंड टॉप लेवल फ्यूडल लॉर्ड्स, मान लो ड्यूक्स, फॉलोड बाय अर्ल्स, followed by, let us say, barons, followed by knights. ठीक है. तो ये जो नाइट है, his land has been granted to him by the baron, right? So who is he going to remain loyal to? To the king or to his immediate superior? To his immediate superior. And it is in this way that the bonds of fealty flowed upwards in the European model. This person is loyal to this person is loyal to this person, hence this person also becomes loyal to this person. But what if this person were to make an alliance and declare war against this person? ये किसके साथ लड़ेगा? ये इनके साथ लड़ेगा, इसके अगेंस्ट लड़ेगा. Similarly, if a situation emerges where this person becomes disloyal to this person, तो यहाँ पे इसके नीचे जितने भी subordinates हैं, who are they going to owe their loyalty to the king or to this duke? To this duke. ऐसा situation यूरोप में possible, ऐसा इक्वेशन इंडिया में इमर्ज नहीं हुआ. While the अमरनायकास swore oaths of fealty to the king, जो उसके नीचे सबऑर्डिनेट्स होते थे अमरनायकास के, पलाईगार्स, अयगार्स एक्सेट्रा, they did not enjoy the same bonds of fealty towards their own immediate superiors. वो किसकी कसमें खाते थे? किसके नाम पर अपने रूल को, अपने पोजीशन को जस्टिफाई करते थे? क्या बोलते थे? Who did they accept as God on earth? The king directly. So all the subordinates in the Vijayanagar state owed their loyalty directly to the king, irrespective of their position in the feudal hierarchy. Is this clear? तो ये बताओ, ये मॉडल इंडिया में लग सकता है? विजयनगर एम्पायर में नहीं लग सकता है. It is in this context that Noboru Karashima and others such as Y. Subrayelu have argued that yes, the Vijayanagar state did represent a feudal polity, but not European style feudalism. Rather, it was Japanese style feudalism, shogunate period ka, especially Tokugawa shogunate period ka. So Tokugawa dynasty was a dynasty of shogun. Shogun was the military leader of Japan. तो जापान में from around 1100 ऐसा equation emerge हुआ that जो emperor है, his office remained intact but he became virtually powerless. इसको दर्जा दिया गया as God on earth, but he was simply ruling as a figurehead. Real authority came into the hands of the most dominant military leader of Japan, known as the shogun. ठीक है? This was a period where Japanese society and the state were highly feudalistic. Therefore, the shogun maintained his primacy, his dominant position through military overlordship, through force. He controlled a large number of feudal lords spread across the land of Japan, known as daimos. ठीक है? Below the daimos the daimos governed extensive regions with their own feudal estates, with their own fiefdoms, with the help of a class of educated warriors known as the samurai. Who were rewarded for their service by their daimos, जिनको वो अपने लॉर्ड की तरह बोलते थे, in the form of land grants, in the form of revenue assignments, by granting them access to horses, metal. जापान में metal बहुत precious था, especially steel बहुत कम मिलता था, right? So swords were extremely valuable. तो जो जितना ज़्यादा valuable होगा उस samurai को उतनी बेहतर क्वालिटी की sword दी जाएगी, उतना ज़्यादा metal दिया जाएगा, right? And finally was the ordinary peasant. Peasantry was at the bottom of this entire feudal hierarchy. Okay? Now, although the daimos gave land to the shoguns and the samurais, and the samurais were loyal to their daimos, but overall किसका सिक्का चलता था? शोगुन का सिक्का चलता था, राइट. सो द शोगुन was able to maintain control over all the other daimyos, especially during the Tokugawa shogunate. Now जापान, medieval जापान में एक बहुत बड़ी लड़ाई हुई known as the Battle of Sekigahara, right? This was, I think, sometime during the 1500s, and that was a battle between various daimyos, collection of daimyos who had rebelled against the shogun. तो shogun को replace करने की कोशिश करते थे. It ended with a decisive victory for the shogun, and जब जीतने के बाद his position became completely dominant, right? He was able to bring the daimyos under his complete control. So by regulating the supply of horses, by regulating the supply of arms and ammunition, by regulating the size of the armies maintained by each daimyo, by regulating the types of defensive fortifications that every daimyo, every feudal lord was allowed to construct, by sending ambassadors and officials to regulate and oversee the internal workings at the regional capitals of the daimyos, the Tokugawa dynasty of shoguns were able to create a more cohesive picture of Japan. So Karashima and Subrayelu ने क्या बोला है? That it was Japanese Tokugawa style feudal system, जहां पर feudalism तो था but with a heavy centralization bias. ठीक है. So it was a Tokugawa style feudal state according to them. ठीक है. Justification क्या दिया है? That Amar Nayakas, what was their claim to power? Were they ruling simply because of their position, or were they ruling at the pleasure of the king? At the pleasure of the king. Kings often acted against the ambitious Amar Nayakas as well. उनको सप्रेस करने के लिए अलायंसेस, काउंटर अलायंसेस बनाते थे. उनको सप्रेस करने के लिए the supply of horses, for example, was controlled, right, by Krishna Dev Raya. In order to maintain control over them, political representatives, military representatives were shared between the imperial court and the feudal courts, etc. Right? तो ये सारे methods use करते थे in order to control the feudal elements, right? And this is the position at which the debate stands as of now, right? Later, Herman Kulke made the argument that it was a military state. It was an early state, and that it was an example of military feudalism. Okay? So he argued that the military since the very beginning had a very important role to play. Kyun? Because the whole of Vijayanagara history was characterized by constant warfare, sometimes for offensive purposes, sometimes for defending themselves, and therefore ये जो military के importance की वजह से the Vijayanagara Empire was a war state. Till the time that the kings were able to maintain a strong army, their position was secure. Once their military weakness was exposed, the empire started to shrink, and this was a major reason for its disintegration as well. And owing to the military heavy nature of the state, military feudalism का concept भी emerge हुआ. the kings came to increasingly rely upon their top military commanders to support them, especially in their offensive and defensive external campaigns. They also depended upon the support of their top military commanders to protect them from internal opponents, right, from internal enemies. Therefore, compromises had to be made. A greater chunk of power had to be shared with the top military brass for this. अर्ली स्टेट इसलिए बोला है बिकॉज अकॉर्डिंग टू हरमन कुलके द स्टेट वाज इन द स्टेट स्ट्रक्चर was in a stage of transformation. It was transforming from a centralized state towards a feudal state. ये ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन कभी भी कंप्लीट नहीं हो पाया है, ठीक है. So it was a state that was actively in or always in a state of flux, जहाँ पे position of the king, the important feudal lords and the other powerful elements were always changing. उनके बीच का जो रिलेशनशिप है, इक्वेशन है, that always kept changing, ठीक है. And in light of these arguments, and especially after the criticism expressed on his views, Bertenstein later modified his views. क्या बोला इसने? That the Vijayanagara Empire represented a patrimonial bureaucracy. क्या होता है इसमें? This is a state system where power is concentrated at the center, ठीक है. तो सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट डोमिनेंट पावर होता है. इट कंट्रोल्स ईच एंड एवरी एस्पेक्ट ऑफ रूल अक्रॉस द टेरिटरी. बट ये जो पावर का कॉन्सेंट्रेशन है, इट इज नॉट इन द हैंड्स ऑफ अ सिंगल इंडिविजुअल, रादर इट इज इन द हैंड्स ऑफ अ class of elites at the center, who are all somehow or the other related to the monarchy through bloodline or through marriage. तो राजा के जितने भाई भतीजे हैं वही इंपॉर्टेंट अमरनायक का है. अब ये दोनों तरह से हो सकता है कि जो राजा के भाई भतीजे हैं उन्हीं को इंपॉर्टेंट मिलिट्री पोजीशन दे दी गई. सेकेंडली, जो इंपॉर्टेंट रीजनल लीडर्स थे who had the ability to mobilize forces at a large scale, they were invited into this closed group through matrimonial alliances. So they are going to be offered the hands of one of the king's daughters or sisters in marriage, or vice versa. The king or one of his successors or relatives are going to be asked to marry one of their daughters or sisters, ठीक है. तो ये सिस्टम इमर्ज हुआ. दिस इज नोन एज पैट्रिमोनियल ब्यूरोक्रेसी. क्या कैरेक्टरिस्टिक होता है इसका? इट इज सिस्टम ऑफ सेंट्रलाइज्ड एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन वेयर पावर इज कॉन्सेंट्रेटेड इन नॉट इन द हैंड्स ऑफ अ सिंगल एब्सोल्यूट मोनार्क बट इन अ ग्रुप ऑफ सेंट्रल एलिट्स, पॉलिटिकल एलिट्स, who are all associated with the ruler with either blood relations or matrimonial alliances. Clear है? तो अभी बताओ कंक्लूजन में क्या बोल सकते हैं हम? कौन सा सही है इसमें? ऐसा बोल सकते हैं कुछ भी? इट इज द डिस्कशन रिगार्डिंग द नेचर ऑफ द विजयनगर एम्पायर is still a matter of open debate. So the debate is not yet settled. Secondly, with so many prominent historians who are highly regarded and respected in their fields having expressed such a large variety of opinions on this topic, एक और चीज क्लियर होती है क्या, that any analysis of the nature of the Vijayanagar Empire is not going to be straightforward. कोई एक सच नहीं है, multiple realities exist. In other words, there is no single explanation or no single characteristic of the Vijayanagar Empire which can be applied to it throughout from beginning to end. The Vijayanagar Empire continued to evolve continuously, right? It exhibited a large variety of features, and probably one of the reasons for this intense debate is विजयनगर एम्पायर वॉज यूनिक, क्योंकि उसका जो स्टेट सिस्टम था वैसा कोई और नहीं था. So therefore historians did not have a ready-made template which they could easily apply to the Vijayanagar Empire, and hence so much of historical scholarly activity, and that is the reason for this rich debate. So there is no simple or straightforward answer to this question. The Vijayanagar state was in a state of constant flux, and it evolved continuously over time. It was unique among other states, and thus there is no readily available framework that could be applied to it. And for any decisive conclusion, क्या चाहिए? More research is required. ठीक है? So that is the note on which we can conclude. अभी बताओ ये डिबेट को लिखवाना है, डिक्टेट करना है, या फिर इतना ठीक है? डिक्टेट कर दूं? कॉम्प्लेक्स है ज्यादा थोड़ा? अच्छा ठीक है. टेक डाउन अ क्वेश्चन आंसर फॉर्मेट में करते हैं. टेक डाउन अ क्वेश्चन. To what degree could the segmentary state model be applied to Vijayanagar administration? State model be applied to Vijayanagar administration? Question mark. In this context, shed light on the nature of the Vijayanagar state. On the nature of the Vijayanagar state. Full stop. 200 words. क्वेश्चन समझ में आया है ना? क्या करना है? we need to discuss the applicability, validity of the segmentary state model of Bertenstein in the context of the Vijayanagar administration. And in the context of this discussion, we need to throw light on the debate surrounding the nature of the Vijayanagar state. Clear? However, हमको यहाँ पे बहुत अच्छे से attention देना होगा on the introduction and structuring of our answer, so that we are able to fulfill the demands of the question. तो introduction में आप यहाँ से शुरू करना चाहोगे या फिर यहाँ से शुरू करना चाहोगे? बर्टनस्टाइन के segmentary states, because the question explicitly demands that of you. So write down. Bertenstein has applied the segmentary state model to the Vijayanagara Empire. Sparking a major debate by challenging the long time dominant view of a centralized administration put forward by which historian? K.A. नीलकंठ शास्त्री. Put forward by K.A. नीलकंठ शास्त्री. ठीक है, तो आपने इंट्रोडक्शन को इस तरह से फ्रेम किया है कि शुरू तो आपने सेकंड वाले आर्गुमेंट से किया है, खत्म आप पहले वाले आर्गुमेंट के पॉइंट पे कर रहे हो. एंड वेरी कन्वीनियंटली यू कैन नाउ एक्सपैंड ऑन द व्यूज ऑफ K.A. नीलकंठ शास्त्री एंड आफ्टर दैट बर्टनस्टाइन. ठीक है, तो ये जो फ्लो है आंसर का, दैट यू शुड बी एबल टू एनविजन बिफोर यू पुट पेन टू पेपर. तो आपको प्रायोरिटी पता होनी चाहिए कि आपको यहाँ से शुरू करना है, नेक्स्ट पॉइंट पे यहाँ पे जाना है, उसके बाद यहाँ पे कंक्लूड आपको किस सेंस में करना है. क्लियर? नेक्स्ट लिखो, नेक्स्ट पैराग्राफ. according to Shastri, comma, the Vijayanagar rulers were absolute monarchs who ruled as gods on earth, and controlled every aspect of the administration through an elaborate bureaucracy comma, a formidable army and centralized taxation. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट पैराग्राफ. ऑन द अदर हैंड, the segmentary state model argues that the actual sovereignty of the Vijayanagar kings extended only up to the core region of the empire. Core region of the empire. Full stop. In other areas, the king only enjoyed ritual sovereignty. सेगमेंटरी स्टेट मॉडल एसेंशियली सॉवरेंटी को अलग अलग सेगमेंट्स में बांट देता है. रियल सॉवरेंटी एंड रिचुअल सॉवरेंटी. रियल सॉवरेंटी ऑफ द किंग कैरेक्टराइज्ड बाय his bureaucratic control, taxing powers and military authority over the area was limited to only the core region. जो बड़ा दायरा था वहां पर ये सब नहीं था, उसमें राजा की प्राइमेसी नहीं होती थी, यानी कि आर्मी भी इसकी सुपीरियर नहीं थी, ब्यूरोक्रेसी भी इसकी खुद की नहीं थी और टैक्सेशन भी सेंट्रलाइज नहीं होता था, डिसेंट्रलाइज था, राइट. एंड इन दीज नॉन कोर एरियाज, पेरिफेरल एरियाज, रिचुअल सॉवरेंटी वाज एक्सरसाइज्ड. ठीक है, तो क्या लिखा है आपने? द किंग वाज ओनली द किंग ओनली एंजॉयड रिचुअल सॉवरेंटी. एंड टू फर्दर प्रूव हिज पॉइंट, बर्टनस्टाइन ने क्या किया? He tried to identify those characteristics of the Vijayanagar state, its institutions and the practices of their kings which would highlight their ritualistic role within the state. और यहाँ पे किसके ऊपर फोकस करेगा ये? Upon a particular festival. कौन सा? महानवमी फेस्टिवल और दी दशहरा फेस्टिवल, है ना. क्या होता था यहाँ पर? विजयनगर में एक मेजर फेस्टिवल सेलिब्रेट किया जाता था. फॉर 9 days huge religious and military processions used to be taken out. पब्लिक सेटिंग में एक बड़ा सा प्लेटफॉर्म बनाया गया था इन द इंपीरियल स्क्वायर ऑफ विजयनगर, known as the Mahanavami Dabba, right? King, all of his courtiers, all his top military leaders were invited and their presence was guaranteed कि वो वहां पे present होंगे ही होंगे, कोई exceptions नहीं होते थे. And in this setting जितने भी rituals हैं, sacrifices हैं, कौन perform करता था? Did the chief priest do this or did the king himself do this? King ही सारे rituals को officiate करता था, के ऊपर preside करता था. What did this signify? That the king was the ritual authority over the entire empire. ठीक है. Secondly, the kings fashioned themselves in the image of their supreme deity. कौन? Lord Virupaksh. तो जो various royal orders होते थे वो साइन किस नाम के अंडर, किस सील के अंडर होते थे? Not under the names of the individual rulers, rather under the name and seal of लॉर्ड वीरूपाक्ष. तो ऐसे कि ये भगवान का सीधा फरमान आया हुआ है, किंग तो केवल उसका माउथ पीस, उसका एजेंट है. एंड यू शुड रिस्पेक्ट द गॉड इन द सेम वे एज यू रिस्पेक्ट द किंग. कृष्णदेवराया had his own image along with the image of his 2 queens installed in probably the most important temple in that entire region, in the तिरुपति टेम्पल. आज भी उसकी ब्रॉन्ज इमेजेस, स्कल्पचर्स वहां पे आप देख सकते हो. व्हाट वाज दिस? एन अटेम्प्ट टू कंसोलिडेट हिज पोजीशन एज द रिचुअल सॉवरेन, एज द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट रिलीजियस फिगर इन द एंटायर रेल्म. ठीक है. सो व्हाट डज ऑल ऑफ दिस सिग्निफाई? ये रिचुअल सॉवरेनिटी पेरिफेरल एरियाज में एग्जिस्ट करता था. क्योंकि, और इसका इंपॉर्टेंस क्यों था? क्योंकि वहां पे रियल अथॉरिटी किंग एंजॉय नहीं करता था, राइट. That is the idea. सब पॉइंट लिखो. Therefore, Bernstein pointed towards practices such as the kings the kings presiding over the rituals at the annual Dussehra festival. Instead of Brahmin priests, comma, or of Krishna Dev Raya installing his own image in the premises of the Tirupati temple. Comma, or the Vijayanagara rulers claiming to be direct representatives of Lord Virupaksha. Direct representatives of Lord Virupaksha. ठीक है, इज दिस क्लियर? ये हो गया बर्टनस्टाइन का सेगमेंटरी स्टेट मॉडल. नाउ वी हैव टू लुक एट द रिएक्शन दैट इट एलिसिटेड फ्रॉम द एकेडमिक कम्युनिटी. इसके लिए वाइड स्प्रेड एक्सेप्टेंस था या फिर यूनानिमसली जो इंटेलेक्चुअल कम्युनिटी है उसको रिजेक्ट कर दिया गया. राइट डाउन. हाँ, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट यू कैन राइट. द views of Bertenstein, however, were almost unanimously rejected. The views of Bertenstein, however, were almost unanimously rejected. Full stop. Now, जो इसने इंस्टेंसेस साइट किए हैं, फॉर एग्जाम्पल द किंग प्रेसाइडिंग ओवर द रिलीजियस फंक्शन रिचुअल्स एट द महानवमी फेस्टिवल, और कृष्ण देव राया प्लेसिंग हिज इमेज इनसाइड द तिरुपति टेम्पल, और द किंग्स टेकिंग द टाइटल ऑफ लॉर्ड विरूपाक्ष रूलिंग इन हिज नेम. ये इसका कोई ऑल्टरनेटिव इंटरप्रिटेशन हो सकता है? क्या हो सकता है? that the kings were deliberately trying to do all of this in order to impose their real authority, right? तो ritual sovereignty को use कर रहे थे अपनी real power को project करने के लिए. The same thing was done by Akbar also. उसने भी तो title adopt किया ना जिले इलाही का, तो why not call his state a segmentary state? वो भी हो सकता है. तो this does not hold true for a complex and organized state society like the Vijayanagara Empire. ये ट्राइबल सिचुएशन में तो अप्लाई हो सकता है. राइट डाउन. मोस्ट आर्ग्यू हाँ इसी पॉइंट में मोस्ट आर्ग्यू दैट द सेगमेंटरी स्टेट मॉडल was never intended for a large, complex and organized state society like Vijayanagar. Rather, it was meant for a small, relatively simple and less organized tribal society. Less organized tribal society. Small, relatively simple and less organized tribal society. Within brackets you can write Allure ट्राइबल सोसाइटी. और ये मॉडल इन्वेंट किसने किया था? यू कैन राइट द नेम ऑफ द स्कॉलर आल्सो. एडन साउथहॉल. विदिन ब्रैकेट्स आप ये लिख सकते हो, ए साउथहॉल in the context of the Allure tribal society. Allure was a tribal society in Africa, North Africa. I think Sudan वाले region में था. I'm not sure. एक बार चेक करना पड़ेगा. ठीक है, right? इतना clear है. And now that Burton style had unconvincingly applied the segmentary state model for the Vijayanagara Empire, अब क्या होगा? Other historians are going to try and reinterpret the exact nature of the Vijayanagara Empire. ठीक है, write down. हाँ, next main point. Burtonstein's failed attempt to analyze the nature of the empire, the nature of the Vijayanagara state, failed attempt to analyze the nature of the Vijayanagara state in a convincing manner, resulted in the emergence of numerous historical opinions. ठीक है, write down. Number 1, T.V. Mahalingam, European style feudal state. Write down sub point. It was argued that the hierarchy of Amarnayakas Palaigars and Ayagars were bound in fealty, F-E-A-L-T-Y, in fealty to their immediate superior, much like European feudalism. ठीक है, next point. However, the biggest limitation of this model is that it does not account for what? the absence of serfdom. और यूरोपियन फ्यूडलिज्म का सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट कैरेक्टरिस्टिक ही सर्फडम होता है, ठीक है, फुल स्टॉप. इंस्टेड the Vijayanagar cultivators largely constituted a free peasant society, a free peasant society, a free peasant society. Peasant society, PEASANT society, peasant society, ठीक है. नंबर 2, नोबुरु काराशिमा and Y Subrayillu, SUBARAYALLU, N Karashima and Y Subrayillu. Tokugawa style feudal state. They argued that the Vijayanagar rulers maintained control over their Amarnayakas in a similar manner to the Tokugawa shoguns of Japan, to the Tokugawa shoguns, SHOGUN, shoguns of Japan, between the 15th and 19th centuries. Between the 15th and 19th centuries. ठीक है, 15th नहीं, 16th and 19th centuries, right? क्या सिमिलैरिटीज दिखाते हैं? राइट डाउन. बोथ, नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, बोथ exercised a monopoly on the supply of critical military resources such as horses, ठीक है, स्टॉप. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, बोथ maintained oversight over the military lords, over the feudal lords through a system of espionage, ESPIONAGE, jasusi, system of espionage, and by exchanging political and military representatives and military representatives. Alright, clear है? नेक्स्ट नंबर 3 लिखो, हरमन कुलके हाइफन मिलिट्री फ्यूडलिज्म. मिलिट्री फ्यूडलिज्म, हरमन कुलके मिलिट्री फ्यूडलिज्म. According to him, due to constant warfare, the Vijayanagara Empire was gradually transformed into a feudal polity, with Amarnayakas enjoying great power and autonomy. Does this mean that power was completely decentralized? Complete decentralization हुआ power का या नहीं हुआ? नहीं हुआ. Next point लिखो. At the same time, सब point कर सकते हो. At the same time, comma, the Vijayanagar rulers always tried to maintain some degree of control. Over the feudal lords. Control over the feudal lords. ठीक है? And what was the result of this? Vijayanagar was described as an early state, a state in which none of the institutions were permanent. हमेशा चेंज होता रहता था, तो हमेशा नया एक्सपेरिमेंट होता रहता था. राइट, राइट डाउन. As such, हाँ, next point. As such, the state was always in a state of flux, and lacked permanency. Full stop. Hence, it was an early state. Number 4 लिखो. Bertenstein hyphen revision hyphen patrimonial bureaucracy. ठीक है? Write down. Later, Bertenstein himself modified his views regarding the nature of the Vijayanagar state. Full stop. He discarded the segmentary state model favor of the segmentary state model in favor of the patrimonial bureaucracy model. Patrimonial bureaucracy model. Full stop. The point. It stands for a centralized administration however power is not concentrated in the hands of a single absolute monarch. Full stop. Next subpoint. Rather, it is shared between a class of political elites who are often associated with the rulers with the ruler singular, with the ruler through kinship ties. किनशिप टाइज यानी कि रूलर्स के ही किन्स होते हैं, उसके ही भाई बंधु होते हैं. ठीक है, फुल स्टॉप. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट. Accordingly, either the king's relatives were ultimately rewarded high rank and large estates, confirming them as Amarnayakas. High rank and large estates, confirming them as Amarnayakas. Or the most powerful Amarnayakas were inducted into the ruling elite through matrimonial alliances with the royal household. Is this clear? हमने सारी पोजीशंस को कवर कर लिया है कि नहीं? Now what is the last portion? Conclusion. लिखो. On the basis of the above discussion, it is clear that the debate is not yet settled, or the debate is still ongoing. And there is no single straightforward theory to explain the nature of the Vijayanagar state. To explain the nature of the Vijayanagar state. Full stop. Vijayanagar administration evolved over time, making it unique, so that no readily available framework, so that no pre-existing framework, you can write, no pre-existing framework could be readily applied to it, could be readily applied to it. Full stop. Hence, more research is required before a final conclusion can be drawn. Before a final conclusion can be, more research is required before a final conclusion can be drawn. Final conclusion can be drawn. DRAWN. ठीक है, तो ये हो गया आपका आंसर. इसी को आपको 200 वर्ड्स में कंडेंस करके लिखना है. सेंटिमेंट सेम रहेगा, वर्ड्स और कंप्रेस हो जाएंगे. सम आर्ग्यूमेंट्स यू आर गोइंग टू हैव टू सिलेक्टिवली टेक आउट. जो एविडेंस प्रेजेंट कर रहे हो, हर थ्योरी को एक्सप्लेन करने के लिए जो एक्सप्लेनेशन दे रहे हो, उसमें भी आपको काफी चीजें सिलेक्टिवली छांटनी पड़ेंगी, हटानी पड़ेंगी. बट दिस इज द एंटायर फ्रेमवर्क ऑफ द डिबेट. क्लियर हो गया है? दोनों डिबेट्स क्लियर हो गए हैं कि नहीं हुए हैं? पक्का? कोई क्वेश्चन आएगा तो एड्रेस कर लोगे इसको. अब आपका काम क्या है कि इसको बार बार जाकर के रिवाइज करना है. दैट इज इट. पोजीशन आई डोंट थिंक कि उसमें कोई प्रॉब्लम्स होंगे, उसमें कोई इश्यूज होंगे. गो लुक एट द प्रीवियस ईयर्स क्वेश्चंस. ज्यादातर क्वेश्चंस वही सेगमेंटरी स्टेट मॉडल से के पे ही ऊपर बेस किए गए हैं, एंड उसके अगेंस्ट जो भी रिएक्शंस हुए हैं उसके बारे में पूछे गए हैं ज्यादातर क्वेश्चन. दैट इज वाई प्रैक्टिस क्वेश्चन भी हमने उसी तरह से किया है. ठीक है, आगे हमारा क्या बचता है? विजयनगर सोसाइटी, इकोनॉमी, कल्चर और कल्चरल कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस ऑफ कृष्णदेव राय एटसेट्रा. दैट वी आर गोइंग टू डू इन टुमारोज क्लास. आज के लिए हाँ हाँ, फॉरेन ट्रैवलर्स के बारे में भी डिस्कशन करना, उनके क्या ओपिनियन. हाँ अच्छा, हाँ, देयर इज वन स्मॉल टॉपिक आल्सो, डिसइंटीग्रेशन ऑफ द विजयनगर एम्पायर. तो ऑल दीज थिंग्स इन आवर नेक्स्ट क्लास. ठीक है, चलिए. Online students, if there are no doubts, can you please let me know so that I may end this session? Thank you.